Cherry Bomb. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of Cherry Bomb. We are talking about social pressure this week, and especially how that shows up in social media arenas, etc., etc. I am Dalila Ali Raja.
Gloria Bigelow.
I'm Tatum Druck.
I'm Bethany Landing.
So, we talked a little bit about other kind of social media things, and I know that when my kid started first using any of that kind of stuff, one, he snuck to do it at first and hid it behind our backs because we didn't want him on any of that shit because of the things that we were concerned about the dopamine levels in the brain and how you get caught up in pressure and like the bullying, and also you're in fucking school, just like go to school and focus, right? But they sneak and get on it. They open, Finstas and spam accounts that you can't be on. And even if they don't have it on their phone, they, can sign in on their friends' phones at school and all of this stuff. And he actually got into some what could have been dangerous. Thank God it wasn't it wasn't actually dangerous, but like meeting, humans online that he's thinking are his boyfriend that I don't know. Do you know this? You've never met this person. You don't know who this is. I think at some point may have gotten talked into sending some photos or like doing something. I was like, people can screenshot that. That's like, there's all these things that just didn't occur to him that someone could do with technology. Ultimately it's balanced out in the later years, but they still get most, especially now during the Rona, they get most of their interactions socially online. And all of that shit's real, like the cyberbullying, the ostracizing people, online and cutting them out of friend groups and like posting not nice things and rumors. Like there were several experiences he had around stuff like that while he was in high school. And I think like, hopefully as adults, we don't experience as much of that, but I do think that we experience some other things. Like what are you guys' thoughts?
I mean, just thinking about what you were saying about that hiding of accounts and stuff, like what we were doing back in the day was saying, oh, I'm going to go stay at Sarah's house, and then sneaking off and like going and doing something completely different. And like how we had such sort of tangible places that we snuck to, that we still like pushed the borders. Like we were in places that we had no business being. No one knew where we were. We had no mobile phones. And when you got into trouble, you just had to figure it out and get home. And the fact that and there was kind of like this thing, if you learned how to get somewhere, you got home. It didn't matter how drunk, how high, how whatever you were, and what state you got back.
You had a much more wily childhood than I did too.
Well, we lived on the ground floor. I literally would jump out my bedroom window and run. What was anyone going to do? Like into the night, no cell phone. Like, yeah. So yes, like I can totally understand.
You were wild.
Desire and that impulse. And I think what's quite different is you can think your kid is in the next room and you're like, oh, okay, we're not on the ground floor. We're fine. There's bars on the window. We're fine. But actually they can be doing just the same amount of dangerous things that we got into.
Because they have the whole world now, right? So we had like our neighborhoods. Yeah, I was running. I wasn't sneaking out because I didn't have a curfew, but I'd be out like drinking with my friends and, and I was always made at home. And I was like in middle school, having rum and cokes and getting in hot tubs and just whatever.
Y'all was wild. My ass was at home.
You got wild later. I did. That's why I wasn't wild in college, because I had been wild since middle school.
I lived out in the country, so it wouldn't have been hard to sneak out, but I would have had to walk a good 5 miles on the highway.
Oh God!
If I would have wanted to get into my tiny little town, and then everything had been closed, so I don't even know what I would have done. But that being said, when I got a job when I was 15. That's when the world changed, because then I had a car and then I went to work, and I somehow convinced my parents that Dairy Queen, it took until 1 a.m. to clean up Dairy Queen after it closed at 10. Yeah. It did not take that long to clean.
I bet it didn't.
It didn't, no. So there was all kinds of running around after that. But yeah, I I feel for parents of, young and teens. Really, I do, because there's a whole set of stuff to be worried about that I just wouldn't even know. It just blows my mind. Because I feel like what I had to worry about was like just my friends and going to school and seeing my friends, and you have issue, somebody's got a fight, going on at school, and then you go home and it's kind of over. Oh no, not now. It's like whatever that is continues online, and it can be fully like totally made up lies about people, like totally made up. There has to be no grain of truth necessary, and it just is a made up thing, and then it becomes truth. It's the beginning of fake news,
and it gets wild because they start people will start like quote tweeting stuff or whatever, and there's like all these terms for it. It's like ratioing, like it's like when you're ratioing, like means your things that you're saying about somebody's tweet that you quoted are getting more likes or more visibility than the original thing because you're making a commentary on it, right? There's sometimes where that stuff happens, and it's stuff that like there's one girl who a friend of hers, and Feeney's got into this whole thing online about it, the conversation, because it was something about rape culture or something like that. But the girl had posted something years ago or said something years ago and been recorded, and somebody put it up online, and then it disappeared. And then somebody pulled it back up years later, and it had gotten all this vitriol because the person had recorded her unbeknownst to her, and had also basically asked a question or encouraged her or started joking around about something, and then cut out the part where they did that. And then it started this barrage of social media like attacks on her. And she's having to explain, and all these kids are like reposting and quoting the thing and sending it, so that she's getting a barrage of hate on social media. And it's something from years ago that she's not only had learned a lesson about, but that she didn't necessarily think in the first place, because the person kind of like set her up to appear that way. And that kind of shit happens all the time. And the bullying gets so much that it's coming from the outside. It's not even just coming from your friends at school that you know. It's all these strangers that are reposting and sending something viral from like your childhood,
Yeah.
And like, I mean, I feel old and cynical and everything at this point in my life, and like this isn't anywhere near the level of vitriol, but like I joined, okay, so there's some really bad traffic problems being caused by what they're doing around my neighborhood with cycle routes. That's really bad news bears. And so I thought I'd join a local group to find out, like, who do you send a response to? Didn't know the local group was full of, like, our version of Republicans.
It's like next door neighbor, but for
like next
the UK.
Door. Yeah, and
sometimes you don't want to know your neighbors.
And I'm like, oh my God, this is so toxic. And they're literally getting things like actually wrong. They're like blaming the Labour Mayor of London, who is Sadiq Khan. And, so there's lots of like racist tones in how he's being described, and like, oh, it's so gross. And so I said, actually, that's not the case about something. And then I got all these responses afterwards. And I don't care about these people. I am a grown woman. But I still sat there like feeling like kind of that vibration of just even entering into that. And on like, really, it's not, this isn't that important. This isn't something that's like, really personal to me. This is traffic. I mean, yeah, but you know what I mean? It's not like about my life choices or anything. Mm-hmm. And I sat there and I was like, God, why do I feel so terrible? And why is this taking a disproportionate amount of my energy?
Yeah.
And I don't have all the answers, because I think sometimes you have to be the person that's in there, like we talked about before. Mm-hmm. But when there's too many of them, you're like, oh, I kind of like, then I don't want to like be against the traffic measures either, because then I'm like, oh, who are my buddies in this? I don't like that. Like, you don't want to be where the racists are. So
right. It's also very, I think about like being in high school and the bullying and stuff that we had to deal with or didn't have to deal with. I had like a real bad experience with the Baird brothers in high school where they made up a fake note that they put my name on it like I'd written the note, and they passed it around classes, and it was talking about me sleeping with this guy named Derek that I used to carpool with. And it went all around the school, and I had no idea that this was happening. And finally somebody said like, this is a note that you wrote. And I was like, I never wrote that. And it was like a whole thing. And I didn't want to go to school, you know, like I was so devastated and so upset that somebody would not even that they think that the stuff that was in the letter that I'd actually written about, you know, like, you know, I was prissy in high school. It was like, I had blowjobs and all these things in there that I know I wasn't doing. And I was just like, I think they're thinking that, whatever. But I didn't want to go to school for days because that was happening at my school. I can't imagine where now, like, what do you do? Because my parents let me not go to school for a couple of days. They were just like, all right, just take a break, take it easy, take a couple of days off and it'll die down. And, you know, they were sorry that it happened. And then I was able to go back to school and people were on to the next thing, right? But now, particularly with where we are with COVID and we're not out, you know, at the DQ, we're not at the DQ or, you know, at Little Caesars, which is where we hung out in high school. And everybody's at home. This is the thing. Like, this is the thing. Yeah. So where do they go?
And there's not, and also there's not, because they're not making human, physical in-person connections. It's also, I think, something that's easier to cut off. Like, there's at some point where an argument happened online and my child had somebody like basically cut them off that they had been building this friendship with, but it was really painful because it's like, that's the only interactions they have. But I think it's easier when you don't have to go to school with people every day. There's people that when he was in school, in high school, and going someplace every day, that even if they had a falling out and stopped talking for a while, you see each other and then you move through it and then stuff evolves. But like when everything is just online, it's much easier to cut people off. Like I know that Louis C.K. is problematic, but he has this great bit where he talks about how what used to happen is when you said nasty things to somebody, like as a kid or as a human, you had to look them in the face and you saw what that did to them. So you saw what it cost. So it's like you got maybe that, because you get a zing, like you get a zing a lot of times from saying the thing that you think is a thing or doing. Like there's a high that comes with that, even if it's just a little one, but you got to see what that high cost you and what it cost the person in front of you. When you're online all the time having these exchanges, you don't get to see the cost, you just get the high. And so people keep doing it in a vacuum and keep going off of the high. And I think it's also bleeding out, I think, into our world, so that some people are carrying that into the world, especially like the Karens and the folks of those worlds are carrying that kind of energy out, where it's just like lobbing vitriol on people. But I mean, I also get I get sometimes caught up in those arguments on the Twitters and the things, and some of that is a high of being able to do the things and saying the things back and doing the whatever. And there's like times, and it gets caught in the loop, like you get pulled to the thing, and my kid was like, Mom, you know, that's like the worst thing, which is what I tell him, but then I get caught up in it too. And he's like, you know, Mom, like that's the worst thing to do is to argue with the racists on Twitter. I said, I know, but like they said this thing and I just had to like send them the link. Like it's what they do to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I feel like who you are in your real life is similar or dissimilar to who you project on social media. Like if it was up to me, I would not be on social media. I didn't even start my social media accounts. Delilah started one of my social media accounts. I wasn't even trying to be in that. Stacey Ann started my Facebook, you started my Twitter, and Lava started my Instagram. I literally have not, if it were up to me and I wasn't a comic or I might.
Dragged, kicking and screaming.
I really I'm private anyway. And then I'm also so just protective of what I see and what I hear and, you know, like my bubble.
Yeah, I don't think I feel like it's definitely changed throughout the years. I feel like when I look back, you know how the Facebook memories come up and you go back and you say, what did I actually post in 2009? and I'm like, I look at it and I go, what were you thinking there?
Good thing you can't get to that MySpace.
Oh my God, I have no idea what I did on MySpace. No idea. I literally got on MySpace to track a guy that I was dating because I wanted to see if he was dating anybody else. That is the only reason I even got on MySpace, because I wanted to stalk him, just to see what he was doing. It was unimportant now, but anyway. So where was I going? Oh, right. I don't feel like now I put anything that's very important at all on there, other than the big moment in my life last year that I decided probably at 3 a.m. To put out this blanket statement that Ben and I had broken up, because it was honestly about that I kept having to have the conversation over and over and over again. And I was like, I can't fucking have this conversation one more time, because I was so like, just, and so I put it out there because I thought, well, everyone that I had left on Facebook, or, I think I just put it on Facebook at that time. Everyone I had left on there were people that I actually were friends with, or that I cared to know and share that with. And so I thought about it and I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do it. So I was just like, just so everybody knows, this is the situation. So nobody would ask me about it anymore and whatever. But I feel like that's like a rare moment for me, is to put something that personal out there. Everything else is like, look at the beautiful sunset, look at the beach, I rode my bike today on the beach, or I'm doing whatever. It's like just nothing, now I don't want to be that out there. So
yeah.
What I loved when you put that out there though was, because I think that is quite brave, like to, I can imagine that moment right before you hit
send.
But also that people like were given sort of, were allowed into your world. So then people have the, hey, like they'll send you a text, they'll send you a message, you want to come to this, you want to do that, like, and it's rare. I think sometimes we're all quite self-contained in our bubbles, and even if we are feeling a bit lonely or whatever, like, there's sometimes a hesitancy before we reach out, or yeah, and there might be a time in your life that you do need like a bunch of people to reach out to you, to make sure that, it's not just all going one way. And I thought that was so lovely. And you got to go do so many fun things afterwards that if no one had known, they wouldn't have known to have invited you.
I agree. That's certainly what happened. I had so much support. I mean, everybody was so supportive, and I didn't even think about that I was going to get all of that out of it. It was more, at the time, I did it just for me to like say it and put it out there. But then all the love I got back was just so nice. And Tatum gave me this notebook. This was a funny story. So Tatum sent me this beautiful notebook to like write down my thoughts and stuff and whatever in. And when I opened it up, I was like, oh, this is so beautiful. And she had written a little note inside of it. And so then I laid it down. I was like, oh, I'm going to start writing something. So it was like 3 days later or something, I started writing. And I didn't even notice that on every page, Tatum had written what all the people on the Facebook notice, all the positive go girl things. Every page, Tatum had rewritten everything that people had wrote to me and who wrote it on the bottom of and tops and stuff. They were on every page.
Oh,
yes.
God, that's
and
so
I called her back. I was like, oh my God, T, this present is way better than I even thought that it was. It was like, so now when I write in that book, I look at that page and it reminds me of like who said something really nice to me at that time, and it's really cool. I was like, oh my God, how did you do this? This is so great. So
that's the kernel of light. No, sorry, go ahead, T.
Yeah, it's, I think sometimes for the good and bad, things online can be fleeting, and I just really wanted like a tangible place for those comments to live that are good and wonderful. And then, you know, and it was actually lovely reading through all of them and, you know, writing them out. Like that felt really nice because again, it's kind of this rolling of an exchange of openness and love, but it came from your vulnerability. It came from that being willing to expose yourself at a really vulnerable time.
Yeah. Maybe social isn't all bad, but
I think it's definitely not all bad. Like I said, I think there's a kernel of God or a kernel of light in everything. It's just like, okay, what is it? And then how do we keep ourselves focused on that part when the other things pop up? Like, I think I've deliberately curated my world online so that I can be myself whenever I want to be. Like, whatever it is I want to say can be received. And I've talked to other friends who are like curating a brand online, and they're like, oh, I wish I could say this, but I can't say that, or I can't answer this thing or this thought that I had. And I've tried to do it where I always actually can say whatever the fuck I want and say it however I want to say it. But I do tend to not always put like vulnerable moments necessarily, because it like I put like spiritual things, and I put like, I think when I come through the other side of the breakthrough, I may like express how hard it was in the time between that, or, you know, some of those things. But most of my stuff is either spiritual, it's promotion, or it's activism, or it's uplifting someone else. Like I like to amplify people and successes and their joy, or, you know, voices that may not be as much heard. Like I like to do that and to use whatever I've curated to be able to do that. And I have what Black Queer Joy is not offensive. It's a separate thing that I created, but like, you know, I think I curate spaces for doing specific things too online. So like when I do Black Queer Joy, for the first year or so, I didn't even I think Glow and my wife were the only two people who actually knew I was doing the account at all. And it was, the whole thing was like, I could be free on there to do whatever. And I could also be free to not feel responsible to activism on there. I could just amplify joy. Like I could just focus on, that's what it's for.
But also knowing that joy is activism, sorry.
Yes, which I agree that joy is activism. I mean, that's the whole premise, is like joy is a revolution in and of itself. But that it could be a pure vessel of joy as activism and as all the things, you know what I mean? But I don't necessarily like, I admire the vulnerability of the people who put those really hard moments out there, because I do think all of us feel alone in those moments and we don't feel like somebody else is there. So when I see them, like the rapper Chica was on the other day, and she has discolorations and some, I forget what it's called, but where facial hair grows on her face, but she's not genderqueer. She identifies as a cisgendered woman, and she often gets asked about her gender, and it makes her uncomfortable because it's one of the things that she's really embarrassed about or feels shy about. But she actually got on the other day, no makeup, and showed like the discoloration that comes from it, and shared how insecure she was about it. And I was like, there's probably a lot of people that have this experience, that her being so vulnerable about it gives them room to feel like I'm okay. You know what I mean? I had like a friend of mine did this film, Chico, did this film called Solace, and it deals with eating disorders. And one part of the film, like a woman's eating stuff out of the garbage can. Like she has an eating disorder, and she like sneaks and pulls like some food back out of the garbage can to eat it. And I remember being at a film festival and somebody standing up in the audience crying and saying, I did that and I've never seen anybody else do it. And I thought like I was by myself in this moment. And so I think the vulnerability does that, but I don't think I always have the courage to do that and to let people in to that part of me.
I think the things that I would normally, that would be kind of like vulnerable about, I usually turn into humor anyway. But we usually, what's hiding behind it is some kind of like sadness or hurt or anger, but I end up turning it into like a funny thing.
Yeah.
But because that's what comedy often is for me. It's like something that's horrifying or tragic or really bothers me, and then I spin it that way. But like when my cat passed, it took me probably, I didn't put it immediately. It took me a long time to even post about it, because I couldn't, like, you know, I was like, I couldn't do it. So it took me, I didn't even really tell many people. I just, you know how I am. Like I am a person that grieves and does all of that stuff very much in private. So, but I also know that like when Tracy lost, when Jolene passed, I noticed that. And so, and I even reached out to her in direct message, like, how did you deal with this? I'm devastated. And getting it from her made it so that I can finally like, you know,
Yeah.
I feel like you get to know people so much better through their pets too. Just a side note, by knowing what people are doing with their pets. And I feel like when Tracy talked about Jolene, I'm like, I've never met you, Jolene, but I still love you. I mean, I'm like, I love you, Jolene. I'm not even a cat person, and Jolene, I love you.
Yeah, that's probably. But I think who I represent myself mostly like. I mean, there's not like, you know, I'm a person that listens to music and cleans a lot. Like that's probably what it looks like.
Yeah. What do you think, T? Do you think you come across as who you are? What do you think?
I mean, I don't know. I think it's quite interesting to see what someone thinks from the outside, but I think that I have at times really shared what's going on with me. And because I've appreciated when someone else has done it, because that's made me feel less alone. So I feel there's definitely been times that I'm like, oh, okay, like I'm, you know, and I check in with why I'm doing it. Like, it usually comes from a place of I'm essentially okay. Like I don't do it if I'm not okay. So I don't want anyone to worry about me. But I have shared like, yeah, really tough stuff. But what I've noticed is that when my life got more complicated, I stopped being able to do that because there's only a certain bandwidth that like that you're allowed tragedy wise. Once you exceed that, you kind of feel like, oh my God, what do I look like? So I started holding stuff in, you know. I mean, it's one thing to like go through cancer and you know and loss after loss and not being able to have children and you know losing the baby and losing the mom and you know like one thing after another, and then I got a really weird medical condition that at different times I couldn't walk, I couldn't stand, I couldn't do anything. And I was in pain throughout my whole body. It was horrible. And it's something that I manage now, and episodes of chronic fatigue and everything else. And I'm like, I can't fucking tell anyone about this. Are you fucking kidding me?
You're like, too much.
You're like, it's too much.
It's too much. It's just too much. And you know, I found it difficult to share about, you know, certain stuff about my life now because, yeah, it's just, I just felt like I was exhausted of myself, you know. How do you share that? And I think that at some point, like you share it when you get to a point where you're like, yeah, I'm okay with this now. Now I can share it. Now I can laugh about it. But at the time, I was so angry, you know. And I think that you know, for a while I just started punishing my body. Like I was, you know, really like chugging down alcohol. One, because when you can't walk, alcohol makes you feel better. Because basically the walls and the floor were moving, right? So I was walking like a drunk person. I had to go, okay, well, the floor is going to be there. It's going to be there. It's going to be there. I don't know. I can't feel it's going to be there. It's going to be there. Okay. And you know, like a drunk person that has like a drink on the other side of the room and they're going to get to that drink and they can't look left and right, but they will make it to that drink. That's how I was walking. So
that's the same reason why drinking on cruises works. It's the same reason why drinking on cruises works. Yeah. Because your inner ear is off, and when you drink, your body just thinks it's like, oh, the reason why all this wonky things are happening is because I'm drunk. And so the things that we have as coping mechanisms, when you see Gloria's face, but it's true, and it's been proven, and that they have it online. I looked it up as a tip before we went on the Sweet Cruise, and it worked. Everybody else was vomiting, and I had some Bonine and some tequila, and I was fine.
You remember how I was fine on that cruise with my little patch, and I was going around giving everybody water, and everybody else was just like,
oh, you were so cute. You were getting them water. I was drinking on the top floor with everybody who wasn't drunk and throwing up.
I was being nice and delivering water.
You were doing good things. You were doing good things. You see Gloria's face throughout that whole thing. Did you see her face?
Gloria wanted to be airlifted off that cruise, by the way. Do y'all remember that?
Girl, I was the one who was on the phone at 3 a.m.
Anyhow.
Anyway, where were we?
Anyhow.
There was a hurricane, and that's why the whole ship full of lesbians were all green and puking, apart from you guys. Like, everyone was so sick.
That was me. I was sick.
Oh yeah, you were sick and terrified as well. Yeah, no,
I'm sorry, I was pointing down. That doesn't.
Oh, right. We're all in different places.
I think we're all in different places for each other.
Yeah.
I don't know, like that bandwidth for being able to hold on, which I think is interesting because I think I appreciate the vulnerability. And I remember, it's so funny because Gloria, you've told this story before about like how at some point you just stopped asking me how I was because I had stuff going on in my life that was like that there was something like stuff was constantly going wrong. My fiance had been killed, my dad, like all these things just were happening in a row. And I had been doing like some self-work things, and I had made a commitment to like when people asked me how I was, actually to tell them instead of like being fake, which is what most of us do. We're like, oh, I'm fine. And I started saying like, okay, I'm going to actually answer people when they ask. And then I can't remember in our 20s, my Gloria's like, yeah, I just stopped asking because it was just too much.
Oh God. Yeah. That's what I said.
You said it later. You didn't say it in the middle of it. You just stopped asking so that and you're like, I just couldn't take it anymore. I didn't know what was going to happen.
Oh God. Okay. Sorry about that. God.
Sorry, Dee. Sorry.
I've been an asshole for like 30 years, guys. And I didn't even know it.
Necessary things to ask. Sometimes it's setting boundary. Like it's like I can't take it, and that's what I need to do.
But actually, I think as humans, and when you see humans, you know, I work with a charity that supports people, you know, going through and dealing with terminal illness and stuff, is actually humans have a bandwidth, right? Like, and there's carer burnout. So you can love someone, but you at some point, you just can't go any further, you know, and it's an absolute real thing. And as the person who's dealing with the trauma, it sucks, but you kind of end up having to learn who you can talk to and how to piece it out and how to get support from different places, because, you know, there is that thing of it's very, very easy for all of us to get to the point of like, I don't know if I can say, how are you?
Yeah, and I don't think that we've been taught how to navigate either side of that. It's interesting. I have like now, I love that I have a kid that's in this generation and that I have some friends that are just like even a little bit older, like that in between space, because they actually are like we as parents have taught them to like self-care and all these different things. And there's been a lot of information fed to them around trying to work through navigating certain things that we just didn't learn. And so a part of the thing is that they have been taught also like check in, like, are you open to, or do you have the emotional space to listen to me vent about something? Like they'll ask first so that it's not like, and they call it like, you know, you don't want to emotionally vomit on other people and you don't want people to emotionally vomit on you. So they set up a set of things with each other to be able to do that. I'm sorry, Glo, what did you say?
You do that.
Oh.
Do that too.
Oh.
Yeah. Like you'll say like, I want to talk, do you have the bandwidth for that?
Oh.
Yeah.
I don't even notice that I do it now. I guess maybe it just got integrated.
Yes.
See, look, Gloria, out of you telling me that story, I learned a lesson and I integrated it generations before others did.
There you go.
You're a leader.
There it is. Yeah.
Glo is definitely a thought leader in so many ways.
So actually, that's true, actually.
I know. I was going to say, I feel like I'm sure you guys can relate to this. There's been someone in your Facebook group of friends or in whatever social friends that have overdone it. Like you're like the Debbie Downer of your, you know, group, and they have flooded their every social media that they have with like this just feels like negative energy. And I feel like there's a line between being real about what you're going through and then day being real day all day day going through everything, and then everything coming out, just all this negative energy. And you kind of feel like, oh, that's like, I can't take all that. Like you're talking about, Dee, it's just like you have to say, you can't check in with the whole group of Facebook and say, are y'all ready for this? Because I got more,
But they can mute it. I mean, oh, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
You can mute it.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say my pet peeve is when someone writes something cryptic like, oh my God, my world is ending. And I have sat there at home and gone, because of my frame of reference, right? I think she's dying, right? I think, oh my God, like she's dying. And then it turns out that she's going through a breakup. I have a lot of sympathy for breakups, right? But when you led with, I think like when you led with that, and suddenly I have no sympathy for what comes after. And so I think like that context is everything. And that cryptic, like, someone puts something up and you're like, have you had a mental breakdown? Like, are you in hospital? Are you in jail? Like, where are you? Like,
or are you on edge? Because some people put that out there as a cry for help, and it's hard to know in this world which things are real and which things are not. And I have seen that where it's genuinely somebody who is on the verge of self-harm, but you don't know the difference. And I know that like it's hard to hold space for, is this real or is this not? And how can I take care of myself in that space? And I also would say, like, as I did like a lot of work much later after that period of time in my youth, there also was a point where my experiences with people and feeling cared for or looked after or supported were only connected to things connected to tragedy. And so there was something where I didn't always feel like I would get support unless there was something like that happening. And so sharing that becomes like, if you haven't started to work through it, it becomes the thing where you're reaching for like, this is the way that I can get love. This is the way that I can get support. This is the way that I can get like a human connection at a level that I need it if you don't have that support system around you. So I think in the same way, like we get a little bit of a zing of a high off of things of an argument, or we get a zing of a high off of these other things, like when somebody gives us a like. I think that there also is a zing of a high out of sometimes sharing tragedy or sad things or upset things, and knowing that we're going to get that barrage of love out of that people want to do that. And I think it's finding a balance of those things. I think sometimes when it's the person who's all like the only thing that they're posting is what's going wrong, and I think it's again a balance, because I think that they may not have people in their everyday life that can give that in a bandwidth with a person one-on-one. So Facebook also, or like social media, spreads that bandwidth out. So it spreads it amongst a lot more people, so that there's not just a few people trying to give that person all of the support or whatever lift they need.
Yeah. But don't you think that there's a balance? There's got to be a balance.
I think that there is, but we don't know. But we don't know what's happening in their life, so that we know what that balance is. You know what I'm saying? So like, if there's someone who is very alone and doesn't have almost any support systems or any close friends that can hold space for deep emotional things, and they maybe have like one or two friends that can, then those one or two friends are always hearing stuff. So they may at some point turn to the internet so that they're trying to take something off of those one or two friends, but they're holding a lot of stuff. I would say therapy would be a good thing, because a therapist is built to hold those things. Seriously, it's like, I had to talk, like there's young people besides just my kid, but like some of his friends, I was kind of like the safe house for a lot of them. They received a lot of shame and a lot of things where they didn't feel safe to talk to their families. And when I talked to them, they used each other for therapy a lot of the times, or were like afraid. And I was like, your friends aren't equipped to hold all of that. They're not equipped. They love you, but they're moving through their own things and they're not professionally trained to hold all of that. But there are people who are. There's people who that's literally their job. And so finding them that's a part of why that's helpful, is because it gives another pathway for those things to go. But a lot of people don't have a therapist. And so they're going to the social media or the people for that.
I think sometimes what we feel though is that there are some people that put things out that they haven't thought how someone might receive it. It's all about them. Like they're absolutely blinkered to how it might be taken, right? So I think it would be lovely if we thought about it as like a two-way system. And I totally get, like, you know, that we don't know what's going on in someone's life, but like kind of thinking about, because I think, yes, this vulnerability movement, this Brene Brown, this, you know, people showing
I love her so much. I love her so much.
Authentic self. But then on the other side, you've got a lot of people that are like, well, I'm just being me and I'm just putting everything out there. But they're not thinking about like, well, if I put this out, what am I asking for? What am I, where is it coming from? Am I sharing to let other people know? Am I asking for help? Am I like, what is my intention with this? And I think there is a lot of just that, like,
it's the emotional vomit. Yeah, I mean, as a recovering codependent, like having those thoughts makes me feel like I'm like trying to take care of everybody else instead of myself. But I know that like sometimes when you have like the tendencies that I have, you pendulum swing to like that opposite side, which is like the narcissism or borderline personality, where it's like they don't think about other people or whatever. I think that there's something in the middle where it has to be a freedom that you can say whatever the fuck you want and know that other people are responsible for if they don't want to hear it. Don't be on your timeline, or don't do your things, or bitch, mute me if you don't want to hear it. If I'm that type of person, you can mute me, you can block me, you can do whatever. You could go off social media and not read anything at all. It's not like I'm forcing you to read. It's not like somebody's holding somebody's eyes open and forcing them to sit and look at your feed. You know, I don't know. You look like you're about to say something, but then
I was just thinking that like I have a similar reaction, you know, like how I am. I'm very funny about my time. Like getting like a text early in the morning about something horrible will set my whole day crazy, you know? And so like, I'm very, you know, oh, did a light just?
My light, the tape just went off of my light. This is a, you know, it's rigged. I have a rig going here. Sorry, y'all.
I literally thought something was happening to my brain. Oh God.
No.
So
no, I have a rig going. Okay. Nobody needed to know that, but there's a technology rig happening here that I'm.
As we're winding up, because our time is almost up. Let's wind up.
Technology.
Okay. My brain's okay. That's good. So what are your takeaways from the conversation?
Balance, and I think anchoring and anchoring in whatever it is that you really need to get clarity on, and balance, and finding the kernel of light and then focusing on that. And if you start to feel yourself feeling like heated in things, like to tap out, like to make yourself like make that feeling the signal to tap out. I know I have a problem with that, but like that, as soon as I start to feel any of that little thing in my body, to be like, I can walk away from this. This bitch is not in my living room unless I let them in.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that the balance is definitely a good one that you go away with, is just, I think that you can still be yourself. And I don't think that you should try to be someone that you're not on social media. But I think that there should be sort of a balance. I mean, I think that you can't always put the fake, everything's wonderful, perfect all the time person out there. But it's also sort of would be nice to have a balance of not always everything bad. So find that happy medium. T, what do you think?
My takeaway from Dalila is that bitch is not in my living room. And that will be how I refrain from having conversations that I don't feel like having on social media. Like, that bitch is not in my living room, meaning I don't have to do this. I don't have to engage.
Refrain yourself.
Yeah, I can refrain. That bitch is not in my living room.
So, oh my God, there's so many. One thing that just, the image that sticks in my mind is poor Bethany trying to get into trouble in the middle of the countryside, having to run for 5 miles. Like, I literally had boys right outside my window, like they'd come knock on my window, like it was on tap, but like you would have really had to have exercised.
I did, and I would exercise. I still don't exercise, so that wouldn't happen. So
and you would have walked off all the liquor by the time you got home.
Oh yeah, totally. I don't believe any of that. So, but Tatum, I believe that you know me well enough to know I have definitely overcome from a lack of.
I think you and I made up for it, Bethany. In spades.
In spades.
All right. Well,
cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.